Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on how Openprise data orchestration can help you with GDPR compliance. Today's webinar, we're going to focus on actually how to use the Openprise platform to help you with data classification and data transfer control. It is a demo and an in-depth discussion. If you are looking for more just basic GDPR education, here are two resources we will recommend you view first. The first one is that if you are brand new to GDPR, need just a basic education on the terminologies and the mandates and the data subject rights, we recommend the first one. This webinar is one we have done with Kickfire. It does a very good job just covering the basics. Now, once you are familiar with just the basic terminology, the mandates, the rights, if you now need to understand what you need to do, we recommend the second resource there, the webinar we have done with Austin Marketo User Group. This one starts with a high-level project plan and goes into the various key items that you should be putting in place to get to compliance. And again, today is really beyond that now, going into the how do you actually use the Openprise product in detail. So we will cover three topics. The first one is how do you do classification and inventory. This is reviewing every record in your database to put the records into one of these three data classifications: likely EU data subject, unlikely EU data subject, and non-deterministic. Once you have each record properly classified, you can automate the processes. One of the key processes is data delivery control. How do you share data with third-party data processors? These third parties that historically gotten a kind of unrestricted access to your database, but no longer that can be the case. This applies to both automated delivery of your data as well as manual sharing of your data. We'll briefly discuss audit, trail, and monitoring as well. All right, let's get started. So the process to do GDPR data classification, you first have to start with cleansing, standardization, and enriching, right? So in order to make sure your classifications is as accurate as possible, you need to make sure your data is as high quality as possible. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of data essentially you just don't know what to do with. So there's a couple of things we recommend here for the Openprise users. You should definitely leverage our open data catalog, all those public data that we make available to you, to go ahead filling in the blanks, right? For example, being able, if you have you have a city, state but no country, we can fill in the country for you. We can clean up your phone numbers and your email addresses. If you remember, we have Google Maps integration, right? So in a lot of cases, when you have missing address data, you can use the Google Maps integration to make sure your address is filled out and properly formatted, so you can actually use that to decipher if the person's country origin, right? And remember, the Google Maps in Google Maps service, the freemium level gives you 11,000 free enrichments a day, so take advantage of that. Now you should validate your email address if you can. This will make sure that your email is actually a deliverable email. So again, based on then once we know it's a proper email, then based on the suffix, we can help determine the origin of the data subject as well. Now, if you don't have the email and don't have the phone number, we highly recommend, again, if it's within your budget, go ahead, get a data enriched. Within our marketplace, there's a number of data partners that can help you with that. Now, once you have the data clean and rich, then when we do the classification process, the classification, we look at everything about the data record that you pull into our system to help make that determination, because again, the GDPR mandate is extensive enough that it doesn't just cover, for example, the person's country of origin, right? That's, for example, even covers say U.S. non-EU citizens who are traveling and working from the EU, or EU citizens are actually staying abroad in the US, for example, right? So, for example, it's not good enough to just look at stuff like billing country and ship to countries. If, for example, if you're a Marketo user, Marketo provides you with an IP infer country, you should look at that too, right? So, for example, if a US person is traveling in, say, Germany and working there for a couple of weeks, and that person is also subject to GDPR protection, so the IP infer country field can help you determine whether the person should be placed under the EU process. So the classification, again, for Openprise, we based on 3 sets of primary fields. The first one is obviously the country fields. And again, there may be many, many country fields in your system. In addition to just the primary country fields, there may in your CRM, there may be difference between billing countries, ship to countries. Again, we talked about the IP infer countries. The domain fields, so based on domain, for example, if it's .de, we know it's from Germany. So there are many other fields in the system can provide that kind of clue about the domain. This includes all various type of emails, websites, and if you have already extracted domain yourself, you can do that as well. Now, we also a suggestion here that, as you know, we also in our website we also have a list of all the free and disposable email provider domains. Make sure you identify those and do not include those records in the classification exercise. Now, the phone number fields also, again, based on the country code, we can also determine if the person might be a EU data subject. This includes phone number, mobile number, fax number, all these different phone number fields. Now, once you classify each record into one of these 3 buckets, we recommend you tag the records permanently with some kind of designation. Our recommendation will be create a multi-value custom data field, something for example, called privacy classification. And this field can now hold various values, including GDPR, Castle. Now, obviously, you can go with individual checkmark type of data fields. But again, as more and more privacy regulations come online, you may find that to be a little bit too cumbersome. So we recommend you simply go with a single privacy classification field that can hold the various values. Once you have these designations tagged, then you should be pushing these things back into your operating platform, your CRM, your marketing automation. This way it makes it really easy for you to, for example, run opt-in campaigns or other type of campaigns in, for example, your marketing automation platform. Okay, let's dig a little bit into the classification logic before we go into the demo. Again, we put each record into 3 categories. The first one is likely EU, second one is unlikely EU, and the third one is non-deterministic. So likely EU means we have found positive evidence that the record has something that will tell us that this person is likely EU, right? So in the first example there, the country field is Germany. So that's pretty obvious. Even though the phone number is +1, which is North America, and the email is simple.com, so it's not, we can't tell anything from that. But it has a positive evidence that country is Germany. Similarly, in the second example, in this record, country is blank. However, the phone number field has +49. Again, that indicates this is possible a German phone number, and so we put that in the likely EU classification. In the third example, although the country says United States and we don't have a phone number, the email has a .de domain. Again, this is a sign that's saying this is likely a German data subject. All right, so those are all examples of the record having positive evidence to say this is likely a EU data subject. Now, for the second core category, in order to be to classify as unlikely EU, we have to have negative evidence that the person is not EU, and we cannot have any positive evidence at all, right? So again, let's take a look at some examples. In the first example here, the country is United States. The phone number is inconclusive, right? And so is the email. So in this case, we have one piece of negative evidence that says the person is from the US, And both the phone number and email are not specific enough for us to say either way. So there's no positive evidence. So in this case, we'll put this in the unlikely EU. In the second example, there's no country. However, the phone number has a +1, which indicates North America. And the emails, again, no telltale signs in the email. So in this case, again, we have a negative evidence in the phone number. We have no positive evidence about whether this person is EU or not. So again, we put this under the unlikely EU. Third examples here. Country is the United States. Email has a suffix MX, which is Mexico. Phone number, again, don't have the proper country code. So in this case, again, we have two negative evidence, but no positive evidence. So this becomes unlikely EU. Third example, the third category is non-deterministic. In this case, what we're saying is that we don't have any evidence, period. There's no positive evidence and there's no negative evidence, right? So in the first example, Europe. Europe is not a country, so that's actually just a bad value. Phone number, again, has no country code. We can tell. Email is just a regular generic.com. There's nothing in this record that tells us either way whether this person is likely or unlikely EU. So we put it in the non-deterministic category. Second example, there's absolutely nothing but just a .com email. So again, there's nothing that tells us either way. On the third example, we have some placeholder value in countries that's not provided. Again, the phone number doesn't have enough information. If there's no email, there's just insufficient data across the board to force it to kind of make a classification judgment. So it gets put in the non-deterministic bucket. Okay, so with that, let's take a quick look at the demo on how this is done in Openprise. Now, under the administration menu, if you go to GDPR controls, on this screen, you get to do two things. First of all, you get to define which data fields we should examine to look at the country, domain, and numbers to be able to identify the information that we can use to do the classification. Now, you may have hundreds and maybe even thousands of data fields you pull into Openprise across the multiple data sources. So it's unrealistic for us to ask you to basically make a list of all the data fields. It's just too cumbersome. Instead, we say, okay, just give us the keywords in these fields that if any of the fields include these keywords, we'll make sure we look at it, right? So for example, country, sure, you can include country, or you can put, for example, put in the additional ones like, for example, like countries, right? So you can include these keywords and we'll make sure we scan for them. Same thing on the emails and domains. By default, we include domain, website, and email. So any data field that contain these three keywords, we'll examine. On the phone number one, we just start with phone. Again, you can put in additional keywords based on what kind of data fields you have in the various data sources that you incorporate. Now, once we have these fields, we know which data fields to scan. Then the scanning is done dynamically, so it's not a back-end process that just kind of happens. So it's on on-demand basis. So once we know which record is in which classification, then you have to make some determination about how do you want to treat especially the non-deterministic category, right? So the likely EU, obviously, you should treat them as EU and put them down the EU-related process. For the non-likely EU, if you do separate the treatment of the EU and non-EU, that obviously go down the path of non-EU records. The question is, what do you want to do about non-deterministic? Non-deterministic records, we give you two options. You can play it safe and treat non-deterministic records as if they're EU records, or you can play a little, little loose, but still legal to treat them as if they're non-EU records. There's no right answer here. It's a personal choice and a choice your company has to make. It's according to your policy. We give you that flexibility. Okay. Now, before we get back to the slide, dig into a little deeper into the data transfer, but let's just touch on a little bit here. So what's the rest of the screen here? What it allows you to do that? Okay, fine. Now you know which record in your database is EU, and now by default, Openprise does not allow any EU record to exit the Openprise platform and deliver to any third-party system, any systems. You have to basically tell us which system is safe to send your EU data to. Now, this usually should include, for example, your internal systems. For example, your own Salesforce, your own Marketo is okay to send that data back. Now, for example, if you're using data enrichment vendors or using agencies, now those may or may not be okay to share data with them, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But here is where you can basically put in some universal controls where you can say, hey, for these data services from our marketplace and these data targets, which ones are we allowed to actually send the EU data to? Again, by default, we're block all. You can specify the exceptions of which you will allow the data to be sent to, and we also apply the controls to the whether you want to control the apply the control to the manual download of data. Again, we'll cover that. All right, go back to the slides real quick, and let's talk about the next topic, which is data transfer. Okay, so now once you have the data properly classified, you know which records EU, which one's not, which one's indeterministic. The next thing you have to do is you have to be able to have the ability to control who can now have access to that data. So you should have been getting your data processors, all your third parties that will touch your data to sign a data processing agreement. If you have not done so, really you need to get it started. Now, there will be some vendors, some third parties that will not sign a data processing agreement. Now, if they do not sign a DPA, you can still work with them. You just can't let them have your EU data at all. So in order to do that, you basically have to be able to control have the means to control who can actually have your data, and being able to demonstrate to any, for example, potential regulator that you have the means to say who has access and who doesn't. Now, let's talk about what exactly is qualified as data transfer. Basically, anytime data leaves the system that you own, and this includes the system that your data processor is using. So, for example, right, if you're using Salesforce and Marketo, for example, Salesforce and Marketo are both data processors in the GDPR context for you. You're the data controller. So not only you have to worry about data leaving, for example, an internal database that's completely owned by you, you also have to worry about data transfer out of the system that you use provided to you by a data processor, like a Salesforce, like a Marketo. So now there's various ways data can leave these systems. If there are any other technology used, for example, use native integration. So they have a building app on the, say, the Force.com platform that extract data into their own cloud, into their own system. That is a data transfer. Any type of API, programmatic interface-based integration, for example, for the Marketo crowd, webhooks is something that's widely used. So anything that's an API is a webhook. You have, for example, any kind of JavaScript running on your form that may be calling another third-party API to, for example, do form enrichment. All these are data transfer because data, again, is leaving your possession to a third party. Now, those are examples of automated program data transfer. There's also a lot of manual data transfer, right? This includes, for example, email attachments, your agency users coming into, say, your Aliquot system and directly downloading data. If you're using any type of file sharing, like a Google Dropbox, Google Folders, and all that, Google Drive, all those are manual data sharing. Or if, for example, you're using a third-party data provider and you download a file, then you go upload the file to their portal and to do matching, that's a data transfer as well, right? You just put the data into their system. So again, the extent of the data transfer can be pretty pervasive. So make sure you inventory all these different ways data can leave your system. All right. Now, so again, there's two general categories. There's a programmatic transfer. There's a manual transfer. So how do you control to control the programmatic transfer using Openprise? You just want to make sure that the in whatever pipeline you're using to do the data movement to transfer data, you have to make sure you're putting the GDPR filters. Okay, and this is again beyond the universal the control that we just talked about, how you designate each data marketplace, the service, as well as each data target to be blocking or not. But you can also put in more specific controls into the pipelines. And I'll show you the specific GDPR filters that we have. Now, what about manual transfer? So manual transfer is a whole lot more tricky than programmatic transfer because again, there's just more people involved and people make mistakes. So now, what you really should not be able to allow any type of these kind of loose non-controlled channels. You should have policies and process in place that says basically you should not be sending out email attachments or using file sharing for any type of personal data. What you need to do is actually set up a data portal with a data catalog and ask your third-party data processors that need to get data from you to come to the data portal and grab the data themselves. To do that, you have to be able. We allow you to put in 3 levels of data governance security policies on top of your data sets, including access policy, data ownership policy, and redaction policy. All right, let's take a look at how that's done. Again, just to recap kind of where we left off on the demo, remember the first level of protection is these universal blocking and the blocking settings and exceptions. Again, for each service in the data marketplace, for each target that you have, you can decide. By default, we block, and you can make exceptions specifically. For example, in this case, we say it's okay to let data go to Google Places. Now, again, whether you want to block download or not, this is also a universal control that's applied here. All right, let's take a look at the programmatic transfer. Now, here's an example of a lead enrichment waterfall pipeline. So if you drill down to this pipeline, again, let me show you how you can put in specific GDPR filters for specific processes. So here, for example, we have a step that says we want to get direct dial and other type of information from ZoomInfo. So in the input filter here, you see that we have added a new filter called the GDPR filter. So when you say add group, you see 2 options. You have your regular filters, and then you have your GDPR filter. When you add a GDPR filter, it essentially basically lets you have 3 choices. You can select an EU record, select non-EU records, or select non-deterministic records. So in this case, we say, hey, only non-EU records is allowed to be sent to ZoomInfo for enrichment. So this is a very, very easy way for you to essentially put GDPR filters in any pipeline step that makes sense. Very, very easy. All right, so that's it for really just programmatic delivery. The manual delivery, again, gets a little more tricky. So we have the mechanism called a data catalog. So if you go under data and click on my catalog, in this example, we set up a Marketo database and expose it 2 different ways. We have the one view for the processors that are GDPR compliant that you do have a DPA with, then we have one without. Now, if you take a look at the configuration of this data source, we have 3 levels of security policy you can layer on this. The first one is what we call access control. So this basically determines which user, based on their organizational affiliation, can view this and even see this particular data set. So in this case, if we say only GDPR non-compliant vendors can see this. All right. Now, once they can see the data, then the next question is which record in the data set are they allowed to see? So for each organization you define, and we can define, but you can define essentially a filter to say anybody affiliated with that organization, what subset of data are they allowed to see based on the filter value. In this case, and to define that, you click on the edit and you get our regular query interface. This is here, again, we use the special GDPR filter to make sure that anybody from the GDPR non-compliant vendors organization can only see the non-EU records. Okay, now, so that can make sure you don't show records that people cannot see, the non-EU records. Now, one last thing that GDPR also mandates, however, people don't talk much about it, is that GDPR says that even if you are sharing these EU records and you have the need to, on a specific data field level, you need to minimize the exposure of personal identifiable information, so-called PII. So now in the US, we're very familiar with, for example, a lot of times when you call the, say, your banking institution, they ask you to identify yourself using the last 4 digits of your social security number. And what they're doing on their end, for example, they're masking everything but the 4 digits, so your help desk person doesn't get access to your social security number. So that's called masking. So for example, and that's just one form of what's called data redaction. So in this case, for example, we say, hey, for the email field, we want to mask everything except the last 8 digits with an asterisk. There are also other type of redaction algorithm we provide you, such as scrambling and replacement with a fixed dummy value. So what does this look like, right? So now I am logged in as a user belonging to a non-GDPR compliant organization. So I arrive at this data catalog to fetch data I want to use. So when I'm looking at data from this particular data set, so now of course we are in a search UI. Let's do a search against country. Here you'll see that when we do search, do a matching, you'll see that although the country list here, we don't have any EU countries. There's no France, there's no Germany, there's no UK, there's no Switzerland, right? Sorry, Sweden. Switzerland is independent. So this way we make sure although the underlying database behind this, the Markello database, has all those countries, you actually are not the user here can't see any of those records. They're being excluded. Now, when the data set is pulled up, you can see that in the email field, we have the data redacted like this. Only the last 8 characters are shown. Everything's displayed as an asterisk. This is, again, data redaction. And if this person downloads this data field from a data file into an Excel spreadsheet, this is what they'll see in the Excel as well. So this is how you would control, again, the manual distribution of data using a data portal, data catalog mechanism. All right, great. Let's wrap up real quick. So we talk about the different ways we can control the data transfer. Again, the 3 things Openprise does for you is that we help you with data classification. We inventory your entire database. After we clean it, enrich it, put it into one of the 3 data classification categories: likely EU, unlikely EU, and non-deterministic. After we help you do the classification, we help you control the sharing and delivery of data to your various data processors, especially important for your non-compliant data processors, making sure they do not have access to the EU portion of your database, whether through automated delivery control or manual delivery control. Now, audit trail monitoring, we didn't spend too much time on it. Essentially, we have many reports and logs that can help you track where has the data being delivered to. The important thing here is that, for example, if a EU data subject sends you a request, say, to be forgotten, not only you have to forget that person in your database, you also have to let all the third party you have delivered ever shared data with to let them know that this person has sent in a forgotten request, and then they have to also remove that person from their systems if they have gotten the data from you. And well, of course, without an audit trail of who you have shared this data with in the past, that will become very difficult, if not impossible. So again, with all the detailed logins and the reports that we provide you, that becomes pretty straightforward. So that's it. That's our the webinar for today. Thank you for joining us. If you have any question, please feel free to contact any of us at Openprise. Be happy to help. Thank you very much. Bye.